beginning with the inaugural session, Back to School, Programs and Strategies to Welcome Children Back. Today, we have with us Amrita Patwardhan, who is leading the education team at Tata Trust. She's been with the trust since 2003, has worked a lot in early literacy, in tribal education, and has mentored a lot of organizations, has mentored me when I worked with the trust. And we would like to hear more from her experience from the CSR side. We have with us Mr. Subir. He is the principal coordinator at Ignis Pahel, an NGO working in education policy and trainings. He has been a former educational quality advisor to MHRD, Government of India. He has developed the quality framework for implementation of Right to Education Act and SSA, and is advising state governments, national governments to develop appropriate models for improving quality of educational government educational programs. We have Sheila Ramaswamy. She has a background in medical and psychiatric social work in public health, and leads the NIMHANS Community Child and Adolescent Mental Health Project, Samvad. In recent years, through her work at NIMHANS, she has been engaged in child protection and mental health work, ranging from designing and initiating community child protection networks to training various teachers and carers within schools, health facilities, and more on a range of child psychosocial care issues. Mr. Ravi Pratap Singh is leading the program of Aid Action International in South Asia, comprising India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bhutan. He is also regional director for South Asia. He's from Aid Action, so we'll also be getting to know more of our own work. Beginning off, we are meeting after at the cusp of the schools beginning after 1.5 years of closures. Everyone coming from different perspectives sees that the world has shifted. I would like to hear from you. What is the new normal from your perspective? May I request Ravi to begin?
Okay, thank you, Alaknanda. I think it's a day when we should hear more from our experts like Subir, Amrita, and Sheila. But I would briefly, maybe it will also set the context in which we would like to perhaps hear more, but definitely not restricted to this. Means the idea is to get as much knowledge from outer world so that we can strengthen our program, not just in India, but globally. And since all of you have not just experience of India, but international, and therefore it's very relevant. I just wanted to say that within Aid Action, we actually looked at this whole COVID-19 as another disaster, but disaster which was so widespread and pervasive that every single person, young or old, was affected. And therefore, it was important for us to look at things slightly differently. We did apply various possible strategies to continue our work on the ground. And that one of the important things which we did, where technology played a very important role, was to have virtual volunteers. So we identified some of our village level volunteers and others who had smartphones. We communicated with them. We continued without making field visits. Our team members continued interacting with them, supporting them in terms of carrying forward the work which was planned, and so on and so forth. Technology played a very important role in that. However, we also realize that when it comes to education and delivery of quality education at the village level or at school level, it requires much sophisticated effort because it is multifaceted aspects which we need to look at. And that's where we realize that digital divide is a major constraint, whether we are talking about affordability or accessibility or anything which we can list down in terms of digital divide, they were there. And therefore, we focused most of our efforts based on our past work, whatever we had built in the past. And one of our approaches as an organization has been to prepare some of the key stakeholders for any disaster. So it was more of a capacity building and preparedness of these people, and primarily in this case, teachers and parents, specifically mothers we focus on, were a part of our work in the past. So we said that if we have prepared these mothers, these parents, these teachers, this will also be a kind of test case. So many of our change vectors in remote areas like Alirajpur district and Jhabua district of Madhya Pradesh, or in the forest fringes of national forests in Balaghat district of Madhya Pradesh, or in the fringes of forest fringes of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Assam, and elsewhere, we kind of activated those things. So in our case, even illiterate mothers conducted the classes for children and so on. Now that was possible because we had already prepared them, and this is also a very important lesson for us globally, that we need to actually be always prepared for any eventuality. This is one much bigger, and in future we will be facing more disasters, more of these kinds of pandemics perhaps, and therefore our job is to be prepared. So I think one of the strategies globally we are going to adopt is to ensure that children are continuing their education, is to prepare parents and prepare teachers so that they can effectively deliver things. One of the other things which we faced was the kind of pouring off or flooding of knowledge or content, whether it was digital content or otherwise. And children were submerged with that, or overwhelmed by this content which was coming to them, because everyone was trying to be one up above the other and wanted to ensure that more and more, and from their perspective, they thought they are sending quality content. We never know how much of it was quality from the children's perspective and others. But what we wanted to ensure was continuity of learning. And that's where, whether it was Africa or Southeast Asia or South Asia, we tried to ensure that continuity of learning of some form happens. Because many of you would know, Subir would know it very well, perhaps for sure, that even when the summer vacation happens, there is a very strong tendency amongst children to drop out of school. So they may not come back to the next session. And this was not 2 months, this is like now extended to almost 2 years. And therefore, our job was continuity more than the content. So, obviously content was important, but we ensured continuity of that. So whether it was our mobile library work in Cambodia, or moving books experiments in Africa or South Asia, we continued with that. We ensured that sufficient or at least minimal level of learning material reaches them. They are able to get together on a regular basis and so on. So I think that's where we would like to hear more And obviously, all other experiences would be very, very welcome. So thank you very much, Alaknanda, for inviting me in the beginning. I think this will help other speakers also to give some advice to us on these areas, primarily continuity of learning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amrita, we would like to hear from you.
Alaknanda, your question really was what is the new normal, and I really don't know, but I think one thing which we need to really remember is that while all of us have been waiting and trying for the schools to reopen, we certainly, I think everybody on this panel will also agree that the situation 18 months back also was not something that exactly we want to go back to in terms of the concerns that, especially your sort of way in which today's topic is named, it is welcoming children back to school. So whether children feel welcomed, I think depends on a whole host of things. So while schools have opened, are they, the whole environment, the interaction, is it welcoming? So I think many surveys also told us that children, teachers, parents are waiting for schools to reopen. So to that extent, I think the fact that now they are reopening is a very positive thing, but the experience finally that the child gets in the classroom and in the school with the teacher, with the peers, with the learning material, is that something that is meaningful for the child? And I think there is certainly a higher level of challenge for the teacher that is given the long gap at one end, the teachers are aware of the kind of time and patience that is needed in order to engage with children, but at another level they are dealing with the centrally taken decision of tomorrow NAS National Assessment Survey happening, and it's such an irony that in many states still the primary schools are not yet open, but we are happily going ahead with testing, where a system prioritizes testing over teaching and learning in that order. I think that's somewhere we again need to remember that while reopening of the schools is a great step, we don't want to go back to that rote learning process, and we need to deal with a long gap where children have experienced all kinds of deprivation at multiple levels, but they have all kinds of rich experiences also in the hardship, and how we are going to allow children to express themselves in multiple ways, and in that process feel welcomed and not just focus on the deprivation and what they don't know, but also what they do know. And I think we also, from the past experience and the previous trends of dropout, we know that if children feel disengaged, if they don't feel they are learning, if they feel they are not comprehending what is going on, then that's a further push kind of a factor. So that's something which we have to be very, very cognizant of. I think that while we are all worried about the learning loss and that needs to be tackled, but whether the focus really needs to be on the child and her experience and the child actually feeling welcome. So I think I'll just say that for now. We'll also hear from Subir and Sheila and then build on that.
Ji. Subir ji.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that, Amrita has put quite a lot of things on the table, and I agree with all of them. Going forward, I don't expect school to live in what we call a steady state. The steady state is that you anticipate 8 months from now, you'll still be running the school and so on. It's not only because the pandemic is here, but also because climate change is now very much more actively here. So I think the notion that the school is something that you can predict will run is not really there. A lot of uncertainty remains, and what has happened has, of course, increased disparities in a very big way. It has also brought out that earlier, pre-pandemic, we practice what I'll call an outsourcing model of education, which is that parents outsource the education of their children to the teacher or to the school. But now, as the pandemic showed, in order to reach, even Ravi mentioned it, you had to connect through volunteers, through parents, through panchayats, and so on. So education is becoming everybody's business. It might be a good idea to look upon everybody as having a role to play. that might be the new normal we may be heading towards. It may not happen. Like my dream is that the rickshawala who's taking children to school, let's say, he says, before the rickshaw reaches that pole, my pedal will turn 23 times, verify. So what happens is that even going to the school becomes a mathematics learning activity for children from a rickshawala who doesn't necessarily have to be a great teacher. But that's obviously not happening and not going to happen. But it's possible because collaboration has become a part of the new normal, which it was not. We're talking a lot about learning loss, and to me, the real learning loss is that of the system and not of children.
Okay.
Why that is so is because it's I don't know how to express it. It's the system was doing one thing. The situation changed. It wants to continue to doing the same thing as it was doing before the situation changed. But what do you call this behavior? This is a loss of learning of a kind.
Okay.
We were teaching the same things in the same amount of time, doing the same test. Now we are doing the same test again, and we want to teach again. Things have changed dramatically. Children are no more what they were. For example, simply in the composition, if I look at it, more children who were in private schools are now in government schools.
Yes.
More children who were in government schools have dropped out.
Right.
So things are very different than they used to be. So if we have to do anything in terms of continuity, I really think we need to work on the education system. And what do they really have to continue? They have to continue not the syllabus and not the content, but three important things which define what quality is. The first is, what is the nature of relationships that children experience? That's the starting point of quality is learning is essentially a set of processes that happen within a set of relationships. So if you cannot guarantee that set kind of relationship, you will not have any kind of learning or you have at least not the kind of learning you want. The second is, what is the nature of processes? Where do you engage children? Do you get them to reflect? Do you get them to apply? Does it connect with them? Is it relevant? Is it meaningful? And learning is not necessarily what is written in our curriculum. As Amrita said, children have learned a lot even during this time. And how do we look at it? How do we make them partners in the process rather than recipients of learning is a very big issue, I would say. And lastly, and I'm saying this, and I'll say this again many times today, which is that learning is about higher order learning. Why I'm worried about all these tests is because everybody's trying to see if children have got the basics. Actually, there are many issues with tests. If you spend a traumatic 2 year and you come back to school and the first thing you have to face is a test, it's a bad thing in any case. So can the system start looking at these three dimensions of relationships, processes, and higher order learning is what I would expect in the new normal as an issue.
Sheila ji.
Yeah, I really think in many ways that this expression, the new normal, is one that has been coined by adults largely to comfort themselves and to lull themselves into some sense of normalcy. The fact is that I think, as always, at least to us at Samvad, the world is divided into two very strongly and clearly. There are children and then there are adults. And then if these two perspectives are so different, from a child's perspective, this so-called new normal is not normal at all. I mean, how can it be normal from a child's perspective to have disruptions in routine, to not go out to play, to not go to school, and to have no mobility, limited social interactions, etc. It isn't. That children are compelled to do these things, to comply because of the pandemic, and to adopt routines that they weren't meant to, that doesn't make it normal. Just like if one were to draw a parallel in a non-pandemic situation, even, you look at the issue of death. What death means to a 45, 50-year-old, with a 80-year-old parent who may have had chronic issues, etc., and who passes on. And what death means to a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old, when he or she loses a primary caregiver. And you often find people saying, of course they're empathetic, but then they say, the kind of banalities that are expressed to the child. Death is a natural thing. We are all going to die one day. It's a bit like that. The death of a caregiver or an experience like that is never normal for a child. Experiences of adversity, whether they pertain to protection risks or other adversities that children experience, whether it is child labor, being in a situation of family conflict, abuse, loss and grief, and so on. These are not, common and normal are not to be confused. And therefore, none of these experiences can ever be normal for children. And therefore, I think from a child mental health and protection perspective, it is about what we do, whether it is within the education system or any other child stakeholder perspective. What are we doing to strengthen the safety and support nets for children, to enable them to cope with what is not normal and what is really hard, actually? What are the mental health supports available to them, to deal with emotional distress, the difficulties that I was just mentioning? What are the protection mechanisms, which, I will return to later as we move forward in our discussions. So I think it is the strengthening of mental health and protection mechanisms that also, in addition to what Amrita said, what Subir said, what Ravi also said, that become really critical. And actually, if one had to talk about one quote unquote good thing, unfortunately, that the pandemic has done, it is to highlight an erstwhile neglected issue, that of mental health. It's really got people to acknowledge it. And now that we have that advantage and the needs are there, which is why Samvad now has been doing huge amounts of work in teacher training, not just regular teacher training, but COVID-related teacher training, and how to what teachers can do to assist children as they come back to school, which I will touch on as we move on. Thanks.
Laknanda, just one thing, while I'm not at all good in Hindi, but is the conversation best done bilingually, or given the audience, I just wanted to check.
So I don't think Hindi should be a problem. We are, I think all speakers are comfortable in both the languages. So I felt, because we were doing this in English, and we are doing this pan India, and a lot of our audience is also in the Northeast. So we felt
Sure. Then that's fine. Right. Please go ahead.
So because of that, we just thought go ahead with English, but Hindi would come in, and as speakers feel comfortable, we can shift in and out of it, code switching. So I'm just thinking that the system, as you rightly said, that we are not all prepared to welcome children back. What should we all be doing? Because we stand in very different places when we are dealing with government schools and supporting people inside schools to welcome children back. Welcoming back, like Sheila ji said, that having strong systems of mental health support, of child protection in place, having teachers who are aware that making a child who is just coming back after 2 years go through a test is not the best possible way to go ahead. So what else can we do to welcome them back? How do we what kind of ideas should we be coming up right now to talk and begin a conversation with the people who are inside the system about welcoming children back? The initial actions and thoughts is what I'm saying. So I wouldn't say who should respond. Please.
All right, I'll go ahead and speak, and then others with more experience can add. The crucial problem is that the system which was focusing only on scholastic learning till now has to deal with emotional issues which it never did.
Yeah.
So, and in normal learning gap situations, we would say that children are not doing well, but teachers at least should be able to do their work. But teachers have themselves been through an enormous amount of trauma.
Exactly.
So it's not like it used to be earlier. What works best, and a little that we have done in a few places, is that this is the time to connect, to listen, rather than to test or to teach.
Right.
So I would say that there needs to be some open-ended interactions with communities and teachers, and to jointly plan what to do. Some of the things I would like to see are that the school should open with in a kind of festive atmosphere, with a Mela-like thing, where there are different things for children and parents to do together, and so on. Not especially the first few days should really be spent on listening to children, what they've done, also what they learned, what they did. They tried out many new things. How did they pass their time, and what their experiences were like. And for teachers to also say how they would like to go about making things happen in the school now, to treat children as partners, and to say that how do we go ahead from here. And children might themselves say, we don't know where we have. You could ask them, what do you feel weak in, what would you like to do.
Right. We
And,
have.
and perhaps maybe after 10-15 days, with children's permission and taking them into confidence, if a test is required, that can be done. But the purpose of that is only for that particular school. It is not for some national level understanding. And really, the nature of school is changing so much. It should, all of these things, they're a community who should be emotionally connected with each other. As Sheila was saying, what is the support mechanism? Support mechanism is going to be essentially all the children with each other, with which of the parents who are there and the teachers who are there. Can we now look at school as a live community, rather than as this kind of disconnected place where some professional activity took place? So that's what I really think would be, welcoming children. It's about a future you want to share for the next whatever years you have ahead of you. That's how it would work better.
Right.
May
Yeah.
I add?
Please.
I mean, I love this idea that Subirji put forward of, reopening school with a Mela. What a delightful idea. And also this idea of the school as a community, instead of being a disconnected part where, some people like to go, some people are indifferent to going, to really be the center of the community, especially where children are concerned.
Right.
Some of the other things that one could do, not as delightful as Subir's ideas, but I think that could also be done. One is, again, as part of the support system, to orient teachers to the contexts in which, from which children are returning. Of course, children always came from a certain context. This child, marital issues between the parents at home. This child never gets breakfast because the parents are never there, severely neglected. This child bullied, that child learning disabilities, this child wonderfully supportive home. So every child actually comes from a unique context. The trouble with school often is, जब बच्चे स्कूल के गेट पार करते हैं, वही यूनिफॉर्म पहन के वो सभी एक होमोजीनियस मास बन जाते हैं, और फिर टीचर्स ऑफन ऐसे उनको लगता है कि समझते हैं कि सभी बच्चे एक हैं. Uniforms also a problem, but that's not true. Right. Now, with these pre-existing contexts, let's say of vulnerability or of uniqueness, whichever way you want to perceive it, you add the COVID issue. What COVID did to each household, that it broke relationships and marriages, that families lost, had illness, that families lost members, children lost family members, friends were ill themselves or had people who were ill, and all of those factors. things aren't the same. So it's important. And then, of course, the livelihoods issue, all the families that lost income and livelihood, and what that then means for very many of these children. So for teachers to be alert and oriented to this issue, कि अगर एक बच्चा ठीक से सीखे नहीं, here is a child who before the pandemic was quite okay with learning. What has happened? So to find out and provide the necessary support. Or you have children even before the pandemic who had developmental disabilities, learning issues. What have these 2 years done to those children? So one is this kind of recognition and orientation to children's unique contexts and needs and how the pandemic has impacted them individually, and then connecting them to the necessary protection and mental health systems, as I said. The other would be a graded exposure, coming to some slightly pragmatic measures, a graded exposure. When there have been disruptions in routine, just as Raviji also mentioned, after summer holidays, how hard it is for children to sort of get back to school because there's been no routine. Now, 2 years of very little routine, it is very intimidating, can be, for children to suddenly have to get into a highly structured day and go from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So whether one could have, for the first week, you just go for 2 hours. And as Subirji also said, play games, do fun stuff so that you reorient and get comfortable in the space. Then you increase it to 3 hours and then 4 hours, so do it in a gradual manner. The other issue would be, I think the education system would really have to be flexible here, कि ऐसे pressure ना हो कि हमें portion खत्म करना है. It's not realistic or possible now. Refreshers have to be done, especially with younger children who are doing more formative learning, like reading and writing and so on. A lot of work will have to be done to sort of get them back to where they might have been before the pandemic. And there are no shortcuts to this. A lot of stimulation activities, what we call as readiness activities, particularly for younger children, which basically means, hand activities and a lot of creative activities that contribute to reading and writing readiness, which younger children cannot now do without, very different needs. We'll have to look at age differentials as well. A child who's coming to first or third grade is not the same as a 9th grade kid. So how do we make these distinctions? So these are some of the thoughts that I wanted to add.
Thank you. I want to talk about the broader changes also that are happening in the sector. There has been a pandemic, yes, and a long period of school closures, but also at the same time, the state has gone ahead with bringing in the new education policy 2020. And then now we have a process that has begun in different states where new curriculum frameworks are being drawn up, which will eventually contribute to a national curriculum framework. So how do you think, it's not just one area or one, way that the education system has been disrupted, but it's a big inside out upheaval. Civil society stands in a very, supportive outside framework when it comes to such major changes in the sector. And do you think, so how do you think this will be affecting these changes, the policy level changes, the huge system changes would be affecting us civil society? So I would like to begin with Subirji, please.
Yeah, so Alakranda, I'll talk about both strands, about civil society as well as the SCF. I won't talk about NEP in itself, it's too big and there are too many things in it. And when you talk of curriculum, one question that naturally arises is, what more can we think of after the NCF 2005 in any case? Everything that could be thought of has been thought of earlier. There is a little bit of difference that, yes, there is more emphasis on experiential learning, though what that is has not been defined. There is also greater emphasis on the use of technology, vocational aspects, more performance indicators for teachers. So there are some variations. There is now more environment education than there used to be. So one of the big shifts that is happening, I don't know whether to call it a shift or not, is that earlier the National Curriculum Framework was made first, and the states were asked to take it on board and create their own out of it. But this time, it's the states that have been asked to make their own state curriculum framework. And then based on those, the NCF is supposed to be formulated. Now, the NCERT is supposed to give some templates. Now, the issue is that the states do not always have the capacity or the experience to do this. And many of them have tried to connect with civil society organizations in the process. We are facilitating one such process in Rajasthan, wherein 20 other NGOs or civil society organizations are involved, and so on. I'll talk about that later. But what's happening in several other states is that randomly different people are being asked to create different parts of that overall document. There are supposed to be 25 position papers. So some states are doing something like asking one diet to write one position paper, another diet to write another one. But the problem is, what if all of them have a different understanding to begin with? Forget capability, forget time issues, all of those things. So experiential learning might mean something very different in the science position paper, in the social science, and then what will the teacher implement on the ground? It's possible that in many states, we are just simply going to get a mass of papers without necessarily something which adds up to a curriculum. That's something which I definitely see. But on the other hand, where it can be facilitated, then it offers certain opportunities to overcome some of the limitations we faced in implementing the NCF 2005. One of the first things that we are now in a position to consider is, who is our child? So if the child is not able to attend school regularly every day, should you make something which requires the child to attend every day, or should you have something which enables the child to learn whenever she attends? If the child doesn't know the language of the classroom, should you do something which allows many languages to function at the same time? So it allows us to bring in equity focus in a manner which, in more implementation terms, which we did not do very well before.
Right.
Who's our teacher? So it allows us to bring in many of those elements which were not done earlier. For CSOs who are involved with this, I would say there are three considerations that really matter. One is, if let's say different organizations are working in some state, and one of the things to realize is that we are not competing. I have to say this because everybody is fighting for a pie which doesn't belong to any of us. And we have no business to be doing that. When different political parties who are opposed to each other can come together and work with each other, then why are CSOs not able to do that? That's something to look at. So there are three underlying things which I think will really help. The first is creating a vision of the child and the society you want to create. Let's say children have been through 10 years of your whatever you make. What will you see in them? What will they be able to do? What kind of society would that lead to? And for that to happen, what is the kind of classroom you will see? What will be happening there? What will children be doing? What will teachers be doing? And therefore work backward from that. So what do we need for this to work across all our 25 position papers, etc. The second thing I would say is that it will really matter to identify the key beliefs and assumptions that are underlying. This is something which, from my experience, however skilled and competent they are, usually within government organizations, they are unable to do this complex level of deliberation because it requires deep debates, arguments, fights, which people are not comfortable with. But in terms of sorting out, beliefs and assumptions about children. For example, a lot of people in the system still feel that children are essentially empty vessels to be filled up or wet clay to be molded, whereas a lot of CSOs feel no, they are actually more like seeds to be nurtured. And you do very different things if you have these different kinds of assumptions.
Right.
Or about teachers, is a teacher a villain or a victim? This has to be sorted out. So on. I'm not going to take time on giving you a long list of these things, but beliefs and assumptions about children, about teachers, about aims of education, about equity, learning itself, so on. So there are many areas on which why this is important is because these are the key things that inform everything that happens in the curriculum in the 25 papers, and this is where the CSOs can play a very big role, I believe. CSO should refrain, I think, from trying to straight away create a position paper for a state, which I see happening in many places. And it's not about having your name there, having your own document, but doing something which can work. A third thing is, which again runs across all these 25 papers, is what is now the approach to knowledge and to the subjects. So knowledge is no more what it was. No, it is not even what it was when NCF 05 was made. So for example, in science, it is scientific literacy that is far more important than the content of science.
Yeah.
So on. So once you do that, then straight away you should be able to convert that into implications for all the papers. And to all this, you need to add one other dimension, which I will call implementability. Now, this is different from simply saying that it lacks reference to practical realities. It has to be defined by practical realities while keeping the aspirations in mind. So there is a provision within the SCF development process for a lot of surveys. I hope, and this is again where state systems will need CSO support to do this. And hardcore realities, including COVID and post-COVID realities, are extremely important to be considered. We were talking of the new normal, the world getting defined. It is not defined for 1 year or 2 years. It is defined for next 20 years. We have to take it into account in a different way. The socio-emotional dimension that has been talked about has to now become part of our curriculum and of our teacher development. One of the curriculum frameworks being developed is that of the teacher professional development. So again, that would come in there in a very big way. And lastly, when you do all this work of developing these position papers, you have to convert that into a curriculum framework. That requires 2 steps. There again, I believe CSOs can play a very big role. The first step is to create a framework that incorporates all the aspirations that are reflected in the position paper. But when you do that, you will naturally find that a lot of things do not fit in. So for example, everything that you want to do, it will take you 1600 hours in a year when only 1000 hours are available. So something has to be left out. So what should be left out? So the second step would be to align it with the parameters and limitations that we have to ensure that the priorities still remain, including the priorities that have been thrown up by COVID. And I will repeat once again, we keep talking of learning loss. It's been a teaching loss. It's been a system management loss. System has lost the ability to manage a situation. Why are we not talking about that? Governments have not been able to respond to situations. So for example, we are looking at NAS to see where children are. What about a responsiveness index to see how well governments are responding to the new educational situation? I would like to rate every single government and officer on that. That's again something which I think CSOs can really do, because that will give government respondents something to live up to. Currently, there is no definition of what is a good educational response to COVID. So no one knows. And I see that as connected with curriculum, because as I mentioned in the opening remarks, the situation going ahead is that school is going to be uncertain with pandemics, as well as with climate change, as well as with economic disparities and migration and many other issues. So in a disrupted world, what should the curriculum be like? What should its flow be like is a question that is being faced right now, which will be the best for India's most vulnerable, to give them the kind of backing and support to find their own place in the future. That's the curriculum question. It can be broken down into small steps, which I have just briefly indicated. And that's in many of them, I believe CSOs have a role to play, provided they are able to stop trying to push a program they have made, or trying to scale one little thing they did somewhere and thinking this should be adopted in toto. They need to think holistically, work together, overcome and live with a lot of gaps, then only you will see this. Otherwise, you will see a mishmash of different ideas which won't add up to a holistic thing.
Yeah, yeah. Amrita, I really want to hear from you about this also.
Yeah, so very quickly to just build on what Subir said, and he's much more closely engaged, like in some of the states. So not so much really talking about SCF, but one of the things I wanted to highlight was that it was again ironical that national education policy got released in a year where such a havoc of pandemic was growing, while it made absolutely no reference of any kind to pandemic and COVID and the larger sort of due to climate change, etc. Also the kind of uncertainty within which the education for next whatever 25 years has to kind of roll out. So I feel that while now very meticulous plans of NEP implementations have been made and different responsibilities have been given, now at least we have to acknowledge that while schools have reopened, we hope they remain open, but somewhere this whole disruption has been of a extreme order, and we need to really factor that into whether it is the SCF or the NEP implementation. So that was one point. Overall, if not so much in the context of the state curricular framework, but overall, if you ask me about the role of the civil society, I feel there are three broad buckets where that a meaningful role can be played. One is to demonstrate things meaningfully with a very deep connect with the community. I don't think the role of the civil society is to sort of implement pan-India and pan-state and that kind of programs, which sometimes you see increasing now desire, like Subir said, one that will implement sort of component and trying to scale it. But it's really that through deep engagement with children, teachers, community, what is it that we are learning, and are we deeply learning, reflecting critically, sort of questioning ourselves in the process. So that demonstration role, I definitely feel continues to be important. And in the current context, it could be that what are the ways in which socio-emotional learning of children can be supported. I think it's, again, there are lots of these terms that get used a lot, or say if it is experiential learning, what does it actually mean? Unpacking that and deeply sort of implementing that and learning from that. The second part is collaboration. So NGOs, civil society, to work closely both with the community, with the teachers and the larger school system. But while it is extremely important to collaborate with the state, I feel a civil society role also needs to be that of a watchdog. So if certain things are not working, that needs to be called out, that needs to be addressed, some noise needs to be made if required on that. So somewhere these demonstration, collaboration and the watchdog kind of a role, I feel what we do within that may change in the current context a little bit, but those are the three broad areas in which I feel the civil society continues to be very relevant. And the last point I wanted to make, building on your previous also question, that while we all agree that we want more of play and art and talk and listening and stories and all of that to welcome children back to school, or we would want a lot of that to be implemented in schools, I think the question really for us to ask is whether we are sort of doing that in our teacher education programs, because we are expecting teachers to do certain things and we don't implement that at all with teachers. So if we want them to listen deeply to children, are we listening deeply to the teachers? Are we sort of honoring their agency? We simply seem to be just telling them what to do, and then that kind of they taking the initiative often then doesn't happen. So I feel a lot of what we want the new curriculum to do, the new practices that we want teachers to implement, that we have to first really very, very seriously start doing really with teachers, because in our own limited experience in the last year in different locations, different teams, the way they responded, if there are things in which you have already invested, then in these times you are able to see its outcome. I think Ravi also mentioned that if you have invested in the community over a long period of time, then they coming forward happens much more naturally. Or because we had invested, I think, in setting up good collections of books and investing in the cadre of people on how to bring stories alive. A lot of that then saw very creative ways in which during pandemic it happened, say at the community level. So unless we make that kind of long-term investment, suddenly to expect that teachers will start doing ABCD while we continue in very old ways to do teacher education, or we write all kinds of things in the curricular documents, but we don't again translate that into teacher education practices, I think that remains a very significant gap. Probably that remained also as a gap when NCF was as a document was released, and that's something that I feel we really need to be very, very mindful of. So teacher education focus, I think, cannot be overemphasized.
Right. That's very good, and important area of remembering when we're going ahead. Ravi, would you like to add in?
Yeah, very briefly, I think when we are talking about things at the systems level, it is very important, and Amrita raised a very pertinent point there, that, while the whole pandemic was growing, NEP was, new education policy was released. So at the highest level of our work or our decision makers and policy makers, they didn't have capability to adjust at that point of time. Means they knew that what is coming, but they could not adjust. They just wanted to release it. It means as if they have done one of their jobs and that's it. So this pandemic has very clearly shown, it is quite clear for many years now, that uncertainty is most certain thing now. And how we are preparing our children, our parents, and our teachers to adjust to those changes, adjust to those uncertainties, work towards that, or prepare them towards that is very, very important. And that's where the point which Sheila made earlier, that teachers need to be equipped with the idea of how do they deal with the emotional issues of children, emotional issues of their own, emotional issues, I would add, of parents, and all that, because things are going to be much, much more uncertain in future. And if we are talking about welcoming back children now, I think it is time now when they are coming. And that's where I really like the idea which Subir made of the Mela, bringing them back, what Sheila was saying, that bring the experiences of teacher, experiences of children there in that Mela. So if we merge these 2-3 things together, that is, I think, very, very important. So I would say that at the policy level, the thrust has to be on the preparedness and how do they deal with uncertainties at all levels, at children's level, at teachers level, and at parents level.
Right. So we are we do feel that there's a lot that civil society can do, and engage in earlier ways of demonstration, but also bringing new thoughts. A lot of your responses keep going back to this increased awareness about psycho-emotional issues, not just for children but also for teachers. We need to work with schools, with communities, to build resilience. And schools are not, I mean, maybe people understand it when they have a time to pause and think about it. But as schools open, everyone is in a rush and getting back to testing, getting back to, let's start with the syllabus. So how do we help find that space, that time for the teachers and parents to approach this in a better way? I want to ask Sheila to please speak more about this. you said that we need to have better support systems. Yeah, please, could you?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and no good answer. Having said that, I was just talking to our head of department today at the child psychiatry department and saying that, Samvad works in 4 verticals: mental health, care and protection, education, and law and policy. And one of our findings through our work has been that our most enthusiastic and committed group, because Samvad does a lot of training and capacity building work, a lot of public series and so on, are teachers. We find it very interesting. They seem to be in as critical as we are sometimes of their methods, their limitations, and like we all do, they have them. But they seem to have the greatest commitment at some level to children. And we find that if training methodologies are developed in certain ways, and this is something that Amrita also alluded to, what pedagogies and methodologies are we using with teachers is the question. What are we teaching in these teacher training programs that, the NEP has particularly emphasized? Are we using a lot of creative participatory methodology? Are we teaching communication skills? Are we listening to teachers, like Amrita said, and their experiences of trauma through the pandemic, their issues pertaining to well-being, and creating these spaces? So are our training programs a space for that kind of discourse? So I think a lot has to do with the content and the pedagogies that we use in teacher training. If we use top-down lecture methodologies that are really hierarchical, that is exactly what goes across.
Right.
Versus multiple other ways. That is one. The second thing, and I think many of us who work in the domains of education and child mental health and so on have been singing this song about life skills education. What when we were kids used to be known as, I think it was called moral science. Then it became value education. Then I don't know, it kind of morphs every few years into something, but the issue is the same. It is 45 to 50 minutes where a lot of wonderful things can be done with children. That is the space where, Subir also referred to this whole issue of higher order learning. School is not meant to only learn, the 3 R's. So the higher order learning is about life skills, socio-emotional life skills, gender, sexuality, relationship issues, negotiation, assertiveness, refusal skills. These are life skills. You can get by at some level without learning to read and write. I'm sure we all agree. But there are all these other skills. So if schools were to create that space, for this kind of socio-emotional learning, because they have them. It's a matter of finding these and feeding these activity-based learning methods that, and a lot of effective stuff can be done, you wouldn't believe, even in 10 or 15 minutes. That's what it takes to plant an idea, if it's done creatively and interestingly. So perhaps the pandemic and the NEP itself are opportunities. The pandemic, because it has brought forward the imperative for mental health initiatives and socio-emotional learning and well-being, etc. And the NEP, because it emphasizes, creativity and learning that is tailored to individual children, etc. So maybe now is the time to really push the life skills agenda, which has been long talked about, but is missing.
Right.
So these are some of the things I think we have to create the space to do in school. And I think, Subir was also talking about the need for transformation, of systemic transformation. What better opportunity than a disaster or a pandemic to go back to the drawing board. It gives us a reason, it gives us an excuse to change things, if you like. You know, what we wouldn't have had pre-disaster pandemic.
This is the time to use the life skills and value education period.
Can I say something here, Alakanda? Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
All right. So, we've been talking a bit about working with teachers, and quite a lot of work has been done. But currently, what's happening across the country. If you look at what states did, the general starting point of the state governments was that these teachers are sitting at home, getting salary for doing nothing. They must be made to do something. So they started putting them on collecting a lot of information on COVID duties and so on, or putting them into training after training after training after, ultimately, teachers were busy with all of that. And many teachers were up till late at night, etc. And then as the pandemic wound down, it didn't, schools were not open, but they were pushed into being in the field, available in school, holding mohalla classes, many things of this kind. I was speaking to a couple of teachers last week, and they said that there are some more than 80 WhatsApp groups formed by the government in which they have to fill information every week. So they don't have any time to do anything. And if you talk to teachers who are really committed, their commonest issue is that nobody seems to mind if they teach badly, but the moment they're trying to do something good, a lot of people seem to have a problem. My own reading is that nobody loves empowered teachers in our country. And if we want things to improve, yes, it is about what kind of training they should go through, both pre-service, in-service, and what kind of support they need. But I think, the governance aspects really need serious consideration, because there is a tick marking mindset. We are not looking sufficiently at the mental models that systems operate with, the habits of thinking that they have. So just to communicate one simple point, if the system has to ask itself the right questions. So if you are not able to hold your in-person class, simply saying I will hold a class through radio or through TV or digitally is not an answer, because you're looking only at one function, one small action. The function of a system is not to hold classes. The function of a system is to reach out to children, to protect them, to offer them all kinds of support, to nurture them, and to enable them to grow in all the different dimensions that they have, of which some of it aims to do by constructing schools, by holding classes. You should not confuse the means with the goals. So if you look at it like that, then the system had to ask itself a different thing, that yes, now children are missing out on some of these for example, why did it take them so much time to find a way to deal with the midday meals being lost to so many children? We've got more stunted children and so many other things as a result. So, so what happens is that systems have a way of functioning. They function on basis of their own protocols, their own ways. So if we don't talk about that, if we don't address it, essentially systems are codified ways of thinking. If you don't deal with that code, all your other things are only going to be superficial, and they will not, everything will keep going back to what it used to be. Like, there is a thing called metal memory. A spring has metal memory. It goes back to its shape, however you stretch it. So when the pandemic is there, it is stretched in a certain way. When you release it, it goes back to what it used to be. So in our interventions, in our engagement, in our interactions and deliberations, we need to look at this seriously. For example, NGOs or CSOs who have the capability could be looking at scenarios. What are the different scenarios that are possible, and what should be the responses, so that the system has a way of at least responding to the different kinds of situations it would face. So given that, yes, some states have tried to make a good response mechanism, but on the whole, the tick marking thing, trying to get back to what used to be the case, holding tests, arranging classes, straight away going to 6 hours a day of classes, etc., is the way the system is behaving. we have to understand our problems are not the teachers. Our problem is the environment and the system in which they work, and schools are a manifestation of that. So by only working with teachers, we will not be going to be making the kind of change that is needed.
We need to engage with the systems as a whole, explore more in depth.
Yeah.
And in fact, it brings to this whole question. See, what happens is that normally when such things happen, such disruptions happen, means I have experience of working in disaster situations in the past as well. More focus goes on restoration and other things.
Correct.
And people forget that how many pledges were made for bringing in the investment for recovery.
Yeah.
So while people are focusing on recovery and ways of recovery, most of them forget that the investment which was supposed to come for this recovery has never come. And I think that's where this whole question, because when we talk about NEP, National Education New Education Policy, we are talking about also increased investment.
Yes.
Now, in post-pandemic situation, in the situation where we know that uncertainties are more certain, how we are going to achieve from 3.1% to 6%, means it talks about 6%, increasing it to 6%. But how we are going to achieve, nobody is talking about it.
In fact, funding has been reduced.
Actually, yes. And means when I talk to my colleagues and some people in the education sector, they say, no, we need to worry more about how this investment is happening, whatever investment is happening, whether it is happening right or not. But I always say that let first the other 3% or let that 6% come, then we will decide how it should be improved in terms of its efficacy. So I think as a policy issue, all of us also need to work towards that. The 6% figure, which has always been elusive from the Kothari Commission onwards. And now when we are talking about this 6% again, at least we should reach there some way. And there has to be a very clear idea which should come from the policymakers, from the government, that how we are going to achieve it, when we are going to achieve it.
Right. These are really very important areas, the way the system thinks and operates, and kind of investment that is actually going in, even though we all, are thinking and agreeing about certain ways of going ahead, but where's the investment coming in for that? We see, I mean, a lot of the things that I wanted to cover, about initial steps and about how civil society should come together for going ahead. A lot of points are being covered, and I'm going to just have this open question. We are trying to see that the system needs some answers. There are spaces in which now, like Subhiji said, there are spaces where we can engage with the system for policy level thinking, help them to write these position papers, but in a way that is more uniform and not just program oriented. What other things? What other modes that civil society can work in? In its own way, in their own space where they have tried to gap fill and scaffold wherever the system is letting children fall through the cracks. We are trying to do that. So what places do you see besides the mainstream that the civil society can engage newly, differently going ahead? Civil society is in education has been focused a lot on teaching and trying to gap fill in teaching. A major need that all of you have spoken about is socio-emotional needs, which now which is a new area for civil society itself. So this is an area that we need to strengthen ourselves, and then help different stakeholders in the system. I like to hear from all of you on this.
So I could start maybe.
Right.
There are, if we look at the impact of COVID on children, we could use two lenses for purposes of convenience. One is a psychosocial and mental health lens, which is what we've been discussing. So that whole gamut of issues that are largely universal, anxiety, depression, children at home, disruption of routines, anxiety about illness, etc. And at more severe levels, loss and grief issues because of persons dying of COVID, etc. There is also another lens, a related lens, but a different one, if you like, the lens of exclusion. So if you use an exclusion lens, that brings to the forefront the impact of COVID on children in terms of protection concerns. That is the issue of vulnerable families, socioeconomically vulnerable families, loss of livelihoods, children dropping out, two things, either children dropping out of school and then getting into trafficking, labor, and other activities that because children have to contribute to the family income, etc. And then, of course, there is the lack of access to education because they cannot access online education. So exclusion that results in protection risks and further exclusion there. Another parameter for exclusion, another consequence or parameter pertains to children with developmental disabilities. So all those children with attention deficit hyperactive disabilities, mild, and I'm saying just mild intellectual disability because children with more severe forms of intellectual disability anyway do not go to school most of the time. So mild intellectual disabilities, specific learning disabilities, and various other, neurodevelopmental disabilities. So where does this whole online, even where children of this nature are from better off families, they're not able to access. They have access to online education, but it's almost like not having access because they're not able to engage. It is not a medium that is suitable for children with these disabilities. A third exclusion parameter would be age. Somebody even put this on chat. One of our viewers brought forth this very pertinent point about very young children. In this pandemic, no one suffered more in the education area than really young children. By that, I mean preschoolers, because this is a really critical period, and all early stimulation and developmental learning for this age group cannot be done through online methods. We have many stories of young children, trying to do preschool classes online. And there are some very funny but sad stories where children have said, I am trying to talk to teacher. Why doesn't she look at me? And can she not hear me? So, the whole thing of immediacy for young children. And because we use so much sensory play and, tactile methods to work with young children, because that is necessary, it's part of readiness skills, hand activities, and so on, that this group gets completely excluded. And that's why the consequences for them in terms of loss of learning, because they don't even have a foundation, the very, very grave situation, this group being excluded. We have a whole generation now or more. And then lastly, this is a slightly slant parameter, but I want to bring it forward anyway. People often do not see the connection to education in this particular context. That of juveniles or children in conflict with the law. You look at the link between these children and education, it's a very serious one. So when children, from difficult socioeconomic situations, or children with learning disabilities and so on, are not able to either drop out of school or are not able to engage in online learning, these children become exceedingly vulnerable. They're not able to participate in these methodologies. And so they fall by the wayside. School and an educational space is not just educational, it is also about safety. It is in general the safest space for children, because there are at least 6 to 7 hours of supervised engagement, whatever the quality of it may be. At least there is adult supervision, and they follow a routine and they're there. Now, these children, when they don't go there, they're out of school. They have inordinate amounts of time to do nothing with. And then, you do the math, peer influence, out of school, the risk of engaging in antisocial activities. So this whole issue of exclusion from education is also very much linked to, the whole Nirbhaya issue, if you like, which the country has been confronting for the last few years, for which the Juvenile Justice Act was amended. One of the reasons that kid also dropped out of school was because there were issues in school. And who knows whether history would have been different if he had not dropped out of school, left his village, and then, gone on to Delhi and child labor activities, etc. So I feel that in the light of, if we use these two lenses broadly, the mental health and psychosocial lens on the one hand, and the exclusion lens on the other, we can already see the multiple groups of stakeholders who would need to come together. So in the area of education itself, I believe that it is necessary to take a transdisciplinary approach to bring in perspectives of rights, of psychosocial and mental health, of protection, and the actors in all of these. So we have to invoke the child protection systems, the DCPOs and so on, to be alert to some of these issues. We have to link teachers both with the protection system as well as the mental health system. So I feel that, when you ask a question like what else can civil society groups and so on do, I think it is really to come together to transcend boundaries of education, protection, and mental health, but to meld them together, because that is what COVID is really pushing us to do. That's one possible way to look at it.
Right.
Very briefly, Alaknanda, to add, I just wanted to say that you particularly have said that while civil society organizations have worked to support teachers or in school, so leaving that part aside, while there is a lot to do in that space as well, I feel that in some ways, the last 2 years, we also, I think a lot of players have re-looked at the community engagement, and whether community engagement was made very, very instrumental in terms of activating school management committees, etc. But that very deep connect with community perhaps was something that was missing in many cases. And I think because at that point in time, different groups were trying to find solutions in a scenario where schools are shut, and the whole digital kind of intervention had its severe limitations, at least in geographies which are remote, and in fact not very remote as well. But I think some interesting models and ways of engaging with the community have emerged from early childhood age group onwards, reaching out to parents and what are the things that they can do with their children, or whether there are community level centers getting more activated, or whether there are libraries getting set up at the community level. Different things in different forms have been tried. None of them are probably totally new or innovative, but I think the kind of attention that at the community level that wasn't paid for a while. I think every groups have been forced to look at it. Now, I think while the schools have reopened, what are the ways in which the learning environment at the community also needs to be kept alive? What are the ways in which parents can continue to support child's learning? And how do we not go back to that very instrumentalist kind of way of a few parents being on the SMC kind of engagement with the community? That's one thing I feel that the civil society can play a role there. And the other issue is that of out of school children. I think we haven't really fully grasped the extent of that issue. And while we know transition of private school children into government and possibly children dropping out, but very authentic data on that is not available. I think states have come up with some data which probably will need thoroughly verified. And those are some of the things which at least currently the system is not very good at doing. In the beginning, when Sheila also talked about each child coming with their own unique context, every out of school child, a single solution doesn't work there. So
Right.
you really need to get into a lot of specificity and follow up and understanding what will work for that child and that community, that family. And I think that could certainly be another area where the civil society intervention can play a very big role. It is not to say that the state doesn't intervene in that. Definitely it needs to. But I think state alone will really not be able to tackle that issue, is my sense.
Right, right. Thank you.
So if I can add to this,
Yes,
I agree with everything that has been said. But in addition, I believe that, though what I'm saying may not apply to all organizations, but it's time for the civil society sector to undertake a dispassionate review of what it has been doing. For instance, there are so many projects which claim that in children's learning levels have gone up from their baseline to end line, but as a country, the learning level is falling. What's going on here? I think especially donors need to look at their roles in, are they promoting things which are not really helping? For example, a lot of projects programs are delivery rather than enabling in nature. People are providing teachers because school is not providing teachers. People are providing books because that's the job of the state. And as a consequence, what I'm finding in many places is that the state is reducing funding and now officially is telling schools that this you have to get from NGO, it is not going to give it to you. There are so many states where this is happening. So there is so much pressure from so many civil society groups for some very limited forms of learning, like basic levels of reading. If that is what you're going to do, for example, 2017 to 2018, one state in India, large state in India, tried to focus only on foundational learning so that it would top in Assam. But actually, its learning levels declined as a result, directly as a result, even after investing so much in it. The reason being that learning does not happen only there and only in that. Is a more holistic thing. You cannot work on part of it. So maybe the civil society sector is pushing things in a certain direction which are not very helpful. And a lot of the work, especially the CSR supported work, is very short term, 1 year, 2 year, and you don't see any results and it stops. There are uncertainties. There are projects, there are fellows who are placed in school who say they have learned a lot, but what has the school learned? Then they move away. And I know of any large number of CSOs, when they go to the school, the teacher says, here are your children, you take care of them. What have you done? What have you created? You have made a monster out of a teacher who now says they are not my children, they're your children, you take care of them. Why are we doing this? I really don't understand. Are we so desperate that we need to do this kind of, so we need to shift away. And I want to mention one very important learning. India has lost tens of thousands of crores for this result to come, but this result has not been learned, which is when you fix the inputs, you get very variable outcomes. So for example, if I say I will give every teacher 10 days of training, some teacher will learn very well and some will not learn very well, and that's it. But if I fix the outcome, that every teacher will be seen to be doing the following for at least 2 hours, then I cannot have a fixed input. I have to have a flexible input because some will need more and some will need less. Because the second one, even if that is the right thing to do, it is difficult to budget, it is difficult to administer. We end up doing the first one. And the CSO sector does it as much as the government sector does. And the result is that there is a lot of activity, but very little result. If you want seriously to get result, you fix the results and you say, I will do whatever needs to be done to get to this result. And stop putting implementers under pressure that you have to show this result, whether it is there or not. So, and there is a need to understand a lot of the time, I think everybody talked about exclusion, about dealing with marginalization, but, there is something in the design of the system. Whatever you do, those who are powerful will benefit and those who are not will lose. How do you overcome that? You overcome that by looking, for example, if you subscribe to the theory that learning must happen every day, then those who cannot learn every day will lose out. So what happens is that a lot of CSOs focus more on how to get children to school every day instead of how to make learning such that they can learn whenever they come. We need to examine what we are doing. Are we Ravi mentioned about investment coming down. One reason why investment coming down is that the civil society is investing in school. If you look at this PGI against which states are rated, one of those 34 items is how much civil society funds has the state been able to garner for education, and states are rated highly if they get more money from civil society funds. So you need to seriously look at what you are doing, because what happens is we are guided more by whether we can find some space or not, whether we can get to do this work or not, whether we can get but we need to be guided more by what the larger picture is. Are we getting there? Is it? And that's why I'm saying it's time to review. If you do review, there are 3-4 things I wish to see happening. One is I would like to see what I'm calling listening events. Just sit and listen to teachers, sit and listen to children, sit and listen to community. Simply listen. Don't have an agenda. You will do this or that or the other. Just listening event. People should feel good about it. Something may emerge from it. Let's not predict what will emerge. Let's see what happens. Let's do what comes out of it and take it forward from there sensitively. Have communities as knowledge partners, not simply in implementing, not doing Shramdan, but as serious. A truck driver knows geography of India. A lohar knows how to separate metals from impurities. That is high-level chemistry. A local health worker knows about the body. Why are they not part of our school as resource persons? How can we bring communities' actual experiential knowledge into the classroom and bring them in with dignity as partners, as teachers, where learning from, not as somebody who is lower down. For example, you will often hear CSOs very happily saying, our community is so great, they have volunteered and given 5 teachers to the school. That 5 teachers being given by the poorest community is a slap on the face of the system. It is saying that you, a big system, are not able to do this. We, the poorest people, are doing this for you. It's not a very good way of community engagement. I would like to see more of reading and thinking communities happening. So library programs, which are also thinking promotion programs, wherein everybody is chatting, communicating around issues, and then evolving where to go from there, not necessarily bound to a particular thing. I would like to see supervisors as teacher supporters, working with individual teachers to craft what is relevant for that particular school and taking it forward with the participation of all who are there. What about teachers as curriculum creators? One of the reasons why teachers are not able to deliver is because in many places teachers are simply told you have to teach this particular thing on that particular day. Now, it is very different in a slum school, a tribal school, and a city school, and so on. Can it be that, can we have a process wherein it obviously will be more complex than what I'm saying, but still that wherein we agree with teachers, or teachers are encouraged to, let's say, make a bid for how much they will achieve within a particular time, and they will say what support they need, and then the job of the system is to provide that support. Can somebody try this out in a block, in a cluster, get the data and show that, look, when teachers have autonomy like this is the serious difference it makes. It doesn't cost more, but gets you better results. And lastly, yes, some work has been done with parents, but parents and everybody in the community as educational collaborators is something we need. So it's really the post-COVID situation is putting us in a position where we need to re-examine what the civil society too has been doing, what different ways of engagement it needs to look at, and slightly less structured, more open-ended programs, because the situation is evolving. Everything is not known about it. Everything is not predictable. If you are compelled to create a plan and a budget where everything is predicted about what is going to happen in which month and how much money will be spent, then you will end up doing what you have written without actually connecting with the situation on the ground. And I believe that that is a very big problem. And then all implementers, who they are accountable to, they're accountable to the donor, and they are not accountable to children and to teachers and to parents. You need to reverse this.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much, Subirji. Thank you. Yes, I'm just, we have only, if we can we take a couple of questions? So we have a question from Sridhar from AA. In the new norm, do you see the mental health of teachers also being a challenge apart from mental health of children? Will this affect learning? Will this affect the learning process? सुबीर जी, आपने कहा है?
नहीं, actually वो मैंने गलती से कर दिया, but I think Sheila is a better person to answer this. All right, still I'll speak briefly on this. Yes, I think mental health of teachers is definitely a big issue at this time, unrecognized in the system. It's there. It's visible in many different forms. I'm not an expert in the area, but every time I interact with teachers, I see them under stress, unable to do the kind of things they used to do earlier. And also I see them a lot more anxious. So yes, it is going to affect this, because they now see the teaching learning process as a bigger burden than they used to see earlier.
Sheila?
Yes.
And another linked question for Sheila perhaps to respond to is come in the chat box, which you did not look at perhaps, Laknanda, which is, Pranav is asking that those children who are getting into grade 1, they are going without being prepared. So what do we do with that kind of thing? I think Sheila would be able to touch upon that as well when you respond, please.
Sure. So on the teacher front, yes, after all, teachers are not people who are any different from the rest of us, if you like. They're also part of families and communities, and as Subir says, much affected by the pandemic, which is why any kind of training or engagement with teachers would require us to engage on their psychosocial and emotional health. We have also, for instance, always told teachers that we engage with that should they require assistance, then they can reach out to us and we'd be able to connect them to relevant, mental health service providers or counselors, as the case may be. And will it affect learning? Like I guess any of us, if we have emotional issues, stress, psychosocial, mental health issues, our work, our jobs, our lives are affected. So most certainly then teachers who have such a huge impact because they interact with so many children every day, it would have in all probability an impact on their teaching and therefore on children's learning. Therefore, as Subir has repeatedly said today, it is really important for us to support teachers if we want them to do differently, or we want them to, be able to work in these very challenging circumstances. One of the stresses for teachers, and we are planning actually to undertake some research on this, is they have had to adapt, like the rest of the world, to the whole digital methodology. Many teachers are not geared for this. That in itself, so the teaching experience itself has changed. They are required to learn so many new things, not easy. For many of us, such as myself, who are technologically challenged, I can completely empathize with this. It's hard. So that is one of the many stresses in addition to their personal ones. On the other question that was raised about first graders, this is exactly what I alluded to earlier. Preschoolers are really much affected in this pandemic because, you know, they've lost out on the opportunity to go to a space where learning of a certain kind takes place or should take place. How this can be compensated or has to be compensated, I suppose, is when they come into grade 1, teachers need to have a clear understanding that many of these kids haven't really been to Anganwadis, they have not been to preschool, and a lot of the work that is done by Anganwadis and preschools will have to be done in grade 1. So, you know, one will have to, again, it goes back to some of the issues Subir also flagged about curriculums. We need that flexibility for a curriculum now more than ever before. And like I said, especially for younger children, that's why I emphasize the need for this curriculum flexibility for primary school kids, you know, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, grade 9 and 10. Whose needs are different. So a lot of these sensory activities, hand activities, eye-hand coordination, finger painting, recognition of, you know, colors, etc. You know, all these things that we do in the gamut of what we call readiness skills, readiness for reading and writing would need to be done in ways that don't pressure children. Perhaps we will need to have 6 months of this to be able to gear children. Otherwise, they will not be able to read and write. We can't move forward. And this is not just a COVID issue. I mean, now it is being recognized because it is affecting large numbers of children. But you look at children who either don't go to Anganwadis, or you look at the Anganwadi systems that we have, where rote learning is largely emphasized. You know, there is an expression in Kannada, and I'll translate it. Anganwadis here, teachers here use it. It's called kai cut by much. That means fold your hands and keep your mouth shut. That's what you're supposed to do when you come to the Anganwadi. That is to make the teacher's job easier. And that is exactly the opposite of the ethos and, you know, the methodology of preschool, you know, where children are meant to explore and do tons of hand activities and sensory play and so on. So it is not as if even in pre-COVID times, our Anganwadi curriculums were really catering to the kind of readiness skills that equip children to succeed and learn in school or to prepare them for school. But at least, like I keep saying, we have a reason now maybe that we didn't have before. So some of these curriculum changes would have to be made and incorporated.
Right. Thank you. We have just a couple of questions. I'm going to allow to unmute. Right. Shilpa.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Subir sir, Sheila ma'am, Amrita ma'am, Ravi sir, I'm very thankful to you. Keeping and luckily I attended lively. I want to ask about the NAS survey happening tomorrow. When of third class especially, the students which were, you know, away from school since 2019, March 2019, at that time they might be in higher KG standard, and of those students which are in government schools, they have not admitted in, you know, pre-primary stage also. Now, how they have been no studies at home, nothing, and they will because the you know, NAS survey has asked the 100% attendees. Now children will be appearing the exam, and I'm very, you know, the things which have happened in this the session, that how children are coping with their family issues, and also the study, their learning time also. They are away from the textbooks, teachers, the warmth of the learning, this survey has made them, pressurized, given a stress to learn something about, literacy part, read and writing thing,
Right.
which they are away from since last 2 years. It was only on WhatsApp group, or maybe once or twice in a week when teachers attended the students personally.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yes, I would like to really as a mental health also to Sheila ma'am and Subir sir also. So this stress is given, and immediately NEP 2020, I'm really hopeful for bringing the activities which you all are talking about to bring in schools, especially in pre-primary and primary section, where no exam, no stress for these children when in learning stage. And even second language English is creating so much hype in Maharashtra, especially, that they are having the stress on the children to learn the language they are not talking at home.
So,
So
Shilpa ji, what is your concern or question?
the concern and question is about reading, writing of the language, which is happening tomorrow. The exam, the survey is happening about reading and writing. So I would like to,
It's happening tomorrow in Maharashtra. All teachers have been told to attend. Children have been asked to attend. And now, as she's saying, class 3 children who haven't had much exposure to schools, to teachers, are now going to be expected to perform. Teachers are, graded on that. So what do you think about this?
and this is the nationwide, as it is here in Diwali, it's a vacation time, but in all India, the schools are open, and they all of us, all India, it is happening. So
Right.
even in whole India, these third class children are away since 2019, away from the school learning, reading and writing, literacy and numeracy.
Yeah. All right, I'll speak first. This is one of those times I wish somebody would listen to me. Unfortunately, no one did. It's about as bad an idea as it is possible to be. It's wrong in every possible way. When it was initially raised, it was raised when the second wave was not there. So they thought that in November it will be possible to do it. But as I was mentioning earlier, system has a tick marking mindset and it is unable to stop itself from doing what it should do. Initially, the idea was that this will, once the system gets to know where children are, it will help them to respond better. That was the reason given for discussing NAS at all. But as it got implemented, now here is where again that habit, the thinking habit that everyone has, states decided to feel they cannot perform badly. So in states where schools have opened even a few weeks earlier, straight away teachers and children were put on to this, that in fact they were told not to call other children but only to call class 3 children and teach only them, and so that the state does well. It's just a ridiculous mindset and it is very, very damaging. It is harmful. I wish that we could somehow code the right to education as a law and say it is harmful to children and put people in jail for doing this. It is just about as bad as it is possible to be. And the worst is that it's okay that test is doing what it is doing, but it is diverting teachers away from the time when they should actually be supporting children instead of stressing them.
Right.
So this is wrong at every possible level. And also from what I know of earlier NAS, I am absolutely sure that there is nothing they can do with this data to tell teachers what to do at all. It is useless data. It will not be converted into actions because the data is very aggregate from all over the country. But the situation is different in every single school due to COVID. How will you come out with any sensible comment? And at the same time, if children are doing badly, you know they're doing badly because they didn't attend school. So what are you going to say? Attend school, which you can say that without the study also, no? So I really don't know. This has to be one systemic, it's like it is rolled, it is put in motion, so it can't be stopped. And the last statement on this is that yes, it is bad. But the fact that nobody is thinking that this is bad and not talking about it is indicating that the situation ahead is going to be worse.
And in fact, Subir, probably whatever 6 months, 8 months down the line, once the result comes, it may not be very different from the last NAS, which was showing reasonably good learning. So even that possibility.
So then the country will say we did very well.
Yeah. So because somewhere, Shilpa ji, I wanted to just say that the fact that we are going ahead with this such a ridiculous action of testing children before teaching them, I feel that somewhere last year in 2020, when the schools closed down in a very casual way, teachers were asked that teach online without really finding out whether they were equipped, whether children had access, whether so many of the in between steps without doing anything. There was one circular that, okay, go ahead and do. And then there was no serious stock taking till a lot of these surveys came out. And the first ASER survey came a while ago, and then several more surveys came, and all of them very consistently showed, at least in rural areas, that a very small percentage, 10% and below, seem to have attended online classes, while about 1/3 of them have received certain learning material through WhatsApp, and that we know is not really learning. It is passing on some whatever information or tasks or worksheets, which is very, very suboptimal. But somewhere I think Subir made that point right at the beginning, that the system has refused to learn. So somewhere, if you are refusing to accept that there has been such a unprecedented disruption and it's an emergency and a lot of compromise has happened, and you are pretending in a way, and you want to be fooled into believing that things have been all right and things moved online, and that moved online for a very small percentage of children. Their own learning may have been, there could be concerns around that, but that kind of transition happened for such a small percentage of children. But I think the other day also, when John Reyes was talking about this issue, I really did feel that in India, given the very sort of several centuries of only few children getting access to education and we being okay with it. So while after right to education and also based on our constitutions, while things have changed, compared to the centuries of this practice, this is a very new idea that all children deserve to learn, and somewhere we are happy to kind of just ignore that reality and pretend कि सब ठीक है, सब transition हो गया online, और इसलिए somewhere we are not really facing that fact. I think other than that, I really don't know what else to say as to how otherwise can we go ahead with testing when teaching has not happened. It absolutely makes no sense.
So since you know the system best, I just wanted to know, can't somebody move the code to stall this?
Yeah, it's difficult for a legal view to be taken. It's not as if the system is within its rights to conduct a test. It's just that it's doing it at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's right.
The system will have many other justifications and so on. And it can always make a force majeure kind of statement that things were so bad and how will we know what to do. The problem is not just that it is doing a test, but that it is still being interpreted as ranking all the states, and therefore the states taking it up you can't go to court for stupidity of this kind. And that's where the problem lies as well. I mean, if it had been
from the public interest view,
suppose we said that we are going to ask 5 questions which are not about learning, but what are you most worried about? If we could teach you one thing, what would you like to learn? If we were to create a NAS, which is assessing ourselves and not children, nobody will have a problem with this. It is what they are doing which is the real problem.
Exactly.
I just wanted to add, शिल्पा जी, आप जो प्रश्न पूछ रहे हैं ना, मुझे लगता है कि आप टीचर होने के नाते और क्योंकि आप बच्चों के बारे में सोच रहे हैं, शायद आपके मन में ये है कि कल बच्चों पे क्या बीतेगी, कैसे करेंगे, कितना स्ट्रेस होगा, शायद यही है. तो अगर ये प्रश्न है, कभी कभी सबवर्जन शब्द जो है ये भी एक टैक्टिक है। अब सिस्टम है, गलत है, समस्या है, लेकिन ये छोटे बच्चे हैं, तो एक स्ट्रैटेजी ऐसे भी हो सकता है आपके लिए कल सुबह के लिए शायद, कि इस टेस्ट या जो भी हो इसके पहले आप बच्चों के साथ आराम से कुछ एक्टिविटी कीजिए, कुछ गाना गाइए, रिलैक्स करवाइए, बताइए बच्चों को कि कभी कभी ना ऊपर से ऐसे कुछ चीजें आते हैं, बोलते हैं कि हमें करना है, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, जितना आता है लिखो। इसमें से किसी को मतलब ऐसा नहीं लगेगा कि आप स्मार्ट है या ठीक नहीं है या आपको आता नहीं है। यानी कि ये परफॉर्मेंस प्रेशर जो है इसको निकाल दीजिए बच्चों से और बोलिए कि अरे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, आधे घंटे का टेस्ट है, ले लो और देख लेंगे बाद में। बहुत बच्चे मतलब स्कूल नहीं गए हैं 2 साल के लिए, सबके लिए मुश्किल है यार। It's okay.
There are going to be states which are going to give the answers also. That's why
So,
the result will look like before.
and that's fine, but the idea is to relieve the stress of children.
Yeah, fair enough.
And there are
That's
just
valid.
simple responses where we can sort of subvert some of these. That's one way.
I think this is a wonderful suggestion.
Good idea. So we are out of time. I'm sorry we haven't been able to take a lot of questions. If I may, if anyone wants to ask a question, just one last question. Kankana, do we have, okay. Ji Prashant ji.
Hello, hi, I'm Prashant from Lucknow. It's very, very interesting, I think, conversation. For a long time, I had a very, very interesting insight. And Subhiji, thank you for bringing so many reflective thing. I think the concept of Mela, I think has been wonderful. I think we'll try to implement in a program like how this Mela or listening event, or even you suggested for the community knowledge partner. I mean, that's that's very fundamental thing, but I think these are things need to be, could be very, very interestingly implement in the area, collaborating with education, and you rightly named it educational collaborators. So I think just wanted to say thank you for bringing a lot of respect and a lot of different notions of the thinking. I'm sure this very, very challenging time for all the stakeholders who are involved in the education, but at the same time coming out with a lot of positive mindset, and just try to see that what are the ways to overcome those challenges, maybe another idea. So I think these are the ideas which actually very, very have a potential of implementability. What you said, implementability. So it's a very now a new word, because we always say employability, and but we always say that we're going to implement it, but we never see that what are the aspirations and what are the different potential of this implementation. Take those outputs and see that the inputs need to be brought in. So thank you so much, Sheila ji, and everybody who has given a lot of insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So just a very, very quick roundup of the key points that that did come up. We have okay. Okay, Kankana.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Madhura from Fulton. My question was, if we are saying that in the first standard, we should implement the curriculum of preschool because they have not been able to attend the preschool, and so we should start with that. So should this go further to the 10th standard and all the classes should attend the earlier curriculum, and would that be the ideal way? And should we just keep aside this notion of age appropriate thing? That's my question.
I see a lot of nodding there.
I can I can quickly say something on this because we worked on this issue quite a bit last decade. So learning even before the pandemic, students who were entering class 9, if you tested them, they were actually in class 4. So which is how we ended up working on this issue on some scale in several places. So the basic approach that seems to work best is not to repeat everything, but to identify prerequisites that are necessary for grade level participation. So what are all the things that a class 9 student needs to know, say from class 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in order to be able to participate in class 9 and to combine many of these together in meaningful manner. Now, what happens is that you're now teaching children that they are cognitively older at an older age, so they can learn some of them faster. You can also combine them because many things are repeated at different times. Let's not be fooled that it's not going to recover everything, because what you gain over the years, you gain over the years. It's not that. This is not a compressed curriculum. This is not a remedial thing. It is simply an accelerated process to help you become ready for the grade you are in.
Right.
That's the best thing you can do. And then as the student participates in that grade, they slowly learn many things. So in this, one part is identifying the prerequisites. The second part is to definitely work on what I will call language of academic proficiency, because particularly for older students, the language is a barrier in science, in maths, in other places. So if you don't work on that. Thirdly, you need to enable study skills, because a lot of this works better if students are able to study on their own, especially once they've learned to read and write a little bit. And lastly, to recombine different components in the kind of sequence where each sequence is marginally challenging, but not so challenging that the child gives up. And once you are able to create those kind of learning materials, then you find that children want to do a lot on their own because they're able to succeed with a bit of effort. So that's the approach. We've tested this sufficiently in 400 schools to know that it works, and in many other contexts. In the case of primary, what will happen is it won't apply in exactly this way, because they are very close to that particular age and they will need a little bit more time than what the class 9 student would need to do class 6 or 8. Nevertheless, the principles would be somewhat similar, and age appropriateness will come a little bit later, but it should come. And lastly, another way to do this is to merge the two. So let's say 60% of the time you're doing learning recovery, but 40% of the time you can do certain age appropriate work. And in all this, please dump the school timetable. That's a barrier. You need to create a different way to utilize time. Maybe work 1.5 hours on something instead of 40 minutes.
Right. Thank you, Subirji. So we have all in agreement that we are not going back to the old situation, and things have been much more disruptive for children. In various ways, we acknowledge that disruptions have been, much more problematic for children. Children need more support. Children need better prepared systems. And as civil society, there are several ways in which we can engage with parents and with systems to help them prepare systems to welcome children back. Some very good ideas, and the Mela idea, because several speakers said that connecting, listening, and acknowledging what has happened is a crucial first step towards going ahead. So I think this would be a great listening and engagement event to get to talking with communities and opening up schools initially as a Mela. There were ideas that we need to ease children with a graded exposure into routine, not start off with complete whole day classes. And we need to I remember everyone saying that we don't need the syllabus. We need the syllabus to be kept aside and have more flexibility, give more autonomy to teachers to choose and decide this. We discussed about the scope that we have for engaging with the system through the processes that have been initiated under NEP implementation and at the state level curriculum. But for these, we need more collaborations, and we need to look at our large scale demonstrations. Like Amrita said, we need to be a watchdog, making sure that the priorities which the state usually overlooks when a lot is there on the table, we stay as a watchdog and ensure that those priorities, the rights of marginalized children, are still on the table as we are going ahead. And we all work in collaboration to help the system prepare. We also talked about teacher training as an important area which we have not really looked at, which affects everything that's the teachers do themselves on the field. So Amrita and Subirji, we all spoke about how content and pedagogies of teacher training should also reflect all that we expect teachers to be doing with children. We heard about life skills, about value education as a important, that period as an important space for engaging with children, going ahead, helping them build important, skills for coping with all the disruptions and all the changes that are now going to come up again and again. We should not be dropping the value education and sports period for, completing the syllabus. There are these ideas that are coming up, and Subirji had said that schools are not just professional learning centers. Let's visualize schools as community engagement spaces, and let's look at schools as spaces that also provide safety and protection. Like Sheila ji said, that schools have been doing a lot for our children, and when we are beginning back and going back, getting children back into schools, we should not be just oriented towards getting them to learn, getting the learning loss, keeping only the learning loss up ahead, but also think about all the wholesome development that happens in the school and ensure that happens going ahead. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to all the speakers for giving us time and sharing your valuable thoughts, experiences. You'd like to add? Okay.
No, I like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot to everyone. Learned a lot, and I hope we get to do some of all this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. It was a real pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.